What's going on, guys? Welcome to We Got a Problem. Well, as some of you may have already heard, the Tory MP Mark Field ejected a Greenpeace protester from a private meeting they had invaded last night. Now, of course, the media and communist parties have jumped on this like a bitch on heat, claiming he assaulted the woman. Theresa May has caved into the outrage and suspended him as a minister. Now let's see what the Venereal Disease Show had to say about it, because on the show they had one of the Greenpeace protesters and the Tory MP Peter Bottomley discussing the fake outrage story.
Very much, Anita. The Foreign Office Minister Mark Field has been accused of assault after he pushed a Greenpeace activist out of a black tie event last night. Dozens of activists gatecrashed the Chancellor Philip Hammond's annual Mansion House speech to the city. Here's what happened. In this Greenpeace video, you can see the activists dressed in suits and red dresses with sashes saying climate emergency, walking towards the building, up a flight of stairs and into the room where Mr. Hammond was speaking. The protester who Mark Field confronted walks down one of the aisles and stands behind guests at the event. At the same time, dozens of other activists rush into the room. Here you can see another woman wearing a red dress being asked to leave. There's a commotion at the entrance where the activists start shouting while security staff try to usher them out of the room.
For me too, there is now just a scintilla of uncertainty. Shame! Yes.
And then you can see the other protester walking behind seated guests and towards Mark Field, where he jumps up from his seat and appears to grab her around the neck. And he marches her out of the room. And we could hear him there say, "Can you get this person out?" And she responded, "It's a peaceful protest." Mr. Field has apologised. In a statement, he said he deeply regretted grabbing the woman, but he reacted instinctively and was worried she might be armed.
Scintilla of uncertainty as to what... Yes.
No, that's fine. Come on through. Missy. Yeah, come on.
The irony, of course, is that this is the government that has just led the world by committing to a zero carbon economy by 2050.
So we hear the host explaining what we can all see happening like we needed her to. Anyone with half a brain cell can see that what he did was well within reason. He used no more force than was needed to stop the threat. No attempt was made to hurt her. The woman was clearly not in any pain. He just removed her from the room. That's a textbook ejection, in my opinion. We have to remember that these people have invaded a private event, so do not have the right to claim it's a peaceful protest. A peaceful protest would have been outside the building and announced in advance with any required permits that you need. It would seem to me this is an illegal protest since they have trespassed on private property and entered the event they was not invited to. It's no coincidence they are dressed in smart looking dresses and suits. That's how they got in the building. They look like guests attending the event being held. It does go to show the massive lapse in security this building and event had though. Let's continue and hear from one of the protesters who was present at the event.
I've been speaking to Hannah Martin from Greenpeace, who was at the event last night. She briefly appeared in the video that we just saw, and also to the MP Sir Peter Bottomley, who's a colleague of Mr Field. I asked Hannah Martin first how the woman who was handled by Mr Field, who is not currently being named, is feeling this morning.
She's pretty shaken up. I think that, you know, what happened was unacceptable and disproportionate. You know, we were there peacefully protesting and trying to make a point about the level of climate emergency that we're in, and no peaceful protesters should be subject to that level of sort of physical reaction, especially when it's unwarranted and especially by a sitting member of Parliament.
You'd gate crashed an event and he was sitting there, saw somebody trying to get past him. He said he reacted instinctively. If you don't know what's going on, you don't know what threat someone poses. Can you be forgiven? Should you be forgiven for your instinctive reaction that you presumably do because you have a real fear of what might happen? Well,
firstly, I mean, it's important to say that, you know, Mark Field has apologised. I think he clearly sees that what he did was wrong. And, you know, the woman in question was there because she cares deeply and passionately about something which we all need to be taking extremely seriously. And if we're not able to peacefully protest, you know, then what is this democracy? It's an incredibly important part of our history as a country that we move forward and take progressive steps towards change, often with peaceful protest.
So she comes out with the complete nonsense that the woman Mark ejected was shaken up. You can see in the video that she is not shaken up because fuck all happened to her. She was removed from the event the same way a bouncer would legally eject you from a club. We also need to remember that a club's bouncer has no more rights than any other member of the public. So Mark was well within the law to do that, providing they are using reasonable force. It's perfectly legal, which this MP did, as I've already said. She then talks about Mark apologising, which I don't think he should have. He did the correct thing in my opinion, especially in the current climate. These activists are getting more and more extreme, and let's face it, Greenpeace is not exactly squeaky clean when it comes to its actions, so no guarantee they would remain peaceful in my opinion. She goes on to claim that it's not democratic to stop them protesting. Now, like I said, that would be true if the protest was outside the building. Entering a building without permission and then gate crashing a private event is not peaceful protest by any stretch of the imagination. Neither is it a peaceful protest under our democracy, you socialist cumbucket. The privileged upbringing you get does not give you the right to ignore the law. Now let's hear from Peter Bottomley, the Tory MP who thinks Mark Field was correct in his actions, like I do.
So Peter Bottomley, was it a proportionate response?
Yes, it was. I would have done the same. Most of the other diners ought to have done. And I make this point. If a personal protection officer for the Chancellor of the Exchequer had intervened, stopped her progress, reversed her and taken her out, he has no more powers than I have or Mark Field has or any of the other diners. I make two or three very serious points. First of all, who knows what she had in her bag? It could have been a knife, it could have been acid, it could have been worse. Secondly, when Hannah says she had a right to be there, you don't have a right to demonstrate somewhere else. When somebody invaded that BBC studio, was it 1988, was it Nicholas Witchell who wrestled the person to the ground so that Sue Laurie could go on broadcasting? I think the BBC should show that item. And on a lesser note, if you've got the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Governor of the Bank of England each speaking about climate change, what clever people are these who manage to obscure their message by wandering into a dinner where they weren't supposed to be at and disrupting it? They seem to harm their own cause and set a very bad example. As the Mark Field, I say, I would have done the same, and I'd do the same again. People should not be able to rush up to the Governor of the Bank of England, to the Chancellor of the Exchequer on one of the major occasions of the year.
So Peter states what I have already said, though he uses the personal protection officer instead of a bouncer, and maybe rightly so. A personal protection officer requires a higher security-related qualification than a bouncer, but the point is the same. They have the same rights that anybody else does. What he did was perfectly legal. He also states there is no way to tell if she had a weapon, or if any of the protesters at any point is really a peaceful protester. Take the milkshaking incidents, for example. There was no prior indication that they intended to assault the likes of Nigel Farage or Sargon of Akkad. They did it while looking like peaceful bystanders. So claiming peaceful is only a claim. It's not a matter of fact. Let's not forget, you entered a building and an event that you was not invited to and had absolutely no business being there. So your protest was not peaceful. Peter then calls out the BBC, who are failing to point out that in 1988 they had a couple of protesters burst into their live news studio, prompting their news presenter Nicholas Witchell to rightly take them down. Peter says he thinks the BBC should show that item. Now, of course, we know they won't, but guess what? I'll show you that video now.
Good evening. The headlines at 6 o'clock. In the House of Lords, a vote is taking place now on a challenge to the poll tax. Tory rebels have said that the tax is unfair and unpopular. Lord Whitehorse told them they should not be confronting the elected chamber. We'll be going over to the House of Lords for the results. There are to be changes in the way nurses work and are trained, changes to stop them leaving the profession. Another prosecution involving undercover police and alleged football hooligans has collapsed. No evidence was offered. Also tonight, Glasnost gives us a glimpse inside the Soviet army. And with 1 week to go before the 4th summit, we have reports from Washington and Moscow on the preparations Mr. Reagan and Mr. Gorbachev are making for their meeting. And repairing the roads, why the cones signal a lot more chaos this summer. And I do apologise if you're hearing quite a lot of noise in this studio at the moment. I'm afraid that we have rather been invaded by some people who we hope to be removing very shortly.
Clear to viewers from the start of the 6 o'clock news that something was wrong.
Good evening. The headlines at 6 o'clock. In the House of Lords, a vote is taking place now on a challenge to the poll tax. Tory rebels have said that the tax...
Sue Lawley apologised and continued to broadcast. Out of vision, her co-presenter Nicholas Witchell and other BBC staff restrained the protesters. Outside the studio, one woman who'd handcuffed herself to camera cables was cut free.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Another and the piece of studio furniture she'd handcuffed herself to were parted in a corridor. Led away, the women repeated their protest.
Protesting about rights for lesbian and gay people.
The inquiry into how the women got into the studio is already underway.
Well, what happened this evening was intolerable. There'll be a proper inquiry and we'll make sure that this doesn't happen again on any of our news programmes. I do say that I think Sue Lawley and Nick Witchell behaved admirably in the circumstances, and I'm very glad that we continued with the broadcast and made sure that all our news went out.
With handcuffs still attached to the camera cable and the 6 o'clock news still on the air, the protesters were taken away by police.
Now, you don't actually see him do it, but you can hear the protesters in that clip being physically restrained, and by the sounds of it, gagged to stop them screaming over the newsreader. No wonder the BBC won't show that clip.
Hannah Martin, Sir Peter Bottomley says it was proportionate, and he didn't know what she was carrying. She was clutching things to her chest. She could have had a weapon as far as he was concerned.
I think what's important to remember is we declared immediately upon entering the room who we were. We said we were from Greenpeace. It was a female-led protest in order to give, that sense of security. We had banners saying we were in a climate emergency. And I think anyone who watches that video can see pretty clearly that she's walking behind him. She poses no threat to him. If he'd have wanted to get up and, block her pathway, which many other people were doing much more peacefully in the rest of the room, he could have done so. He could have spoken to her, but instead he slams her against a pillar and then grabs her by the neck and pushes her out. He's not a police officer. He's not authorised to do that. He's a member of Parliament. He's an elected representative, and I don't think his behaviour was proportionate. I think anybody seeing the video would agree.
Hannah,
Sir
you
Peter
know
Bottomley.
the police officer has no more power than a member of the public. If you're a constant protester, you know the law, you just misdescribed it. Each of us has a responsibility to intervene. And I've made the point again, I'll make it again. If someone had managed to intervene before Joe Cox got assaulted and killed, that would have been good. If someone had intervened before Robert Bradford, another of my MP colleagues, got murdered in his constituency advice, that would have been good. When that Liberal MP's caseworker was killed, that would have been good. They could have said, I'm a peaceful protester, before they did something really bad.
Hannah Martin, respond to that.
I think that I'm quite shocked, really, to hear Peter Bottomley say that he would have done the same thing, particularly given that Mark
specifically
Field
what he was saying
has
about other
apologised.
incidents where they have ended very badly, well-known incidents, and he's saying if someone had intervened, then that would have been good.
I think we have to look at the facts of this case. We'd described who we were. Nobody else in the room was responding with the same level of threat that Mark Fields did. She was walking peacefully behind him. She had no weapons. Her hands were clear. She had leaflets that she was handing out. We have to actually look at the facts of this and not just compare it to other unrelated incidents.
Do you not suspect he may have been afraid in that moment, and that's why he reacted like that. What do you think might his motivation?
I can't speak to how Mark Fields was feeling in that moment. I think that we all have a responsibility to react to our feelings with proportionate behaviour. So whether or not he felt threatened, he could have then reacted in a different way, as many others did in the dinner. You know, many other people blocked or, you know, prevented us from entirely delivering our speech, which is what we were trying to do, without slamming us against, you know, poles and then taking us out by the necks. You know, there's a proportionate reaction that's appropriate.
So Peter Bottomley, I mean, the lady involved may decide to bring charges. He has referred himself under the ministerial code for parliamentary scrutiny on this. I was speaking to Labour's policing minister, who said if the police do investigate, he needs to resign or be sacked by his boss, Jeremy Hunt. What do you say to that?
I'm not really interested in what Labour are saying. Remember, it was Joe Cox, a Labour MP, who got murdered by someone out in the open. I don't normally talk about it, but when my wife was health minister, a woman came up to her, apparently reasonable, and then violently assaulted her. When my wife had eggs thrown at her, those could have been rocks. I think we each have a duty to protect each other. If you want to get on front of a microphone, as Hannah has now, because of this incident, you ought to apply politely. I keep trying to get things on the news, and occasionally I get accepted. If I came into Millbank and tried to get past the 4 levels of security and grab a microphone, you'd switch me off. I think the woman in red was switched off. She could have been a danger, and even if she weren't a danger, you should not just allow people to disrupt major events. What would happen if that became every cause? It wouldn't just be Greenpeace and climate change. And I repeat this point.
Yeah, I mean, sorry to interrupt.
If this protest had not taken place, what the Chancellor and the Government of the Bank of England said about climate change would have had more publicity.
As the host points out, and both myself and Peter earlier stated, his response was proportionate, and that he did not know what she had on her, which, as far as I'm aware, in law, if you suspect someone is armed and might harm you, then you can use pretty extreme force to protect yourself and others around you. And then to claim that he slammed her against a pillar when she did not get slammed against any pillar. Claiming he grabbed her by the neck when he's not a police officer also makes no difference, as I've said previously. The police have the same rights as we do in this situation. Especially considering that her being there is against the law. Hence why the BBC clip I showed you earlier from 1988, the protesters involved got arrested for breaking the law. I hope the woman reports him to the police, as it will get rubbished and this bullshit can end. Peter even calls her out for this blatant lie, since as an active protester, she knows the law, and she knows that the police have the same rights that Mark did, before pointing out if people had intervened in the past when MPs had been attacked and killed, they would still be alive. When Joanna Gosling asked her to respond to that, like the complete leftist shitweasel she is, tries to deflect it and say she is disappointed someone does not agree with her ridiculous opinion. Her response about looking at the facts of this case is funny because she misses out the fact that she had no right to be there. The protest was illegal since they had no right to be in the building. She is missing out the fact that Mark and others legally removed the entitled rich women out of the event and carried on regardless. She also lied about the woman's hands being clear before instantly saying she's handing out leaflets. Make your mind up. And let's not forget that the video shows her holding her phone. Did this woman not watch the videos of her own group going in there before she come on the show and started lying? What an idiot. She can't even answer the basic question about the possible fear Mark and other MPs might feel in this situation because it would destroy her defence. She wants to be the victim when they invaded a private event, so they are actually the aggressors. Any action to remove them is a defensive action, pure and simple. Let's not forget, other people forcibly removed these deranged spunk trumpets from the event. It's simply because he is a cabinet minister that this whole fuss is even occurring. She is right on one thing in that clip though. When he states if he felt threatened, he could have acted differently. Yes, love, if he felt threatened, he could have acted very differently. Because legally, he could have defended himself with actual violence. Especially since it's not long after the 3rd anniversary of Joe Cox and the recent milkshaking I said about earlier. I expect MPs are very worried about escalations right now. Now we also get the host bringing up Labour's worthless opinion on the matter, which Peter rightly shuts down as it's irrelevant. Who cares what the socialist wants? Before commenting on the fact that his wife was attacked when she was the health minister. Of course, the host has to try to interrupt him, as this is the BBC and they always do that, but he continued by pointing out these idiotic women harmed their own cause by taking the limelight away from the event, which was actually about climate change. Well done, geniuses.
Obviously, I hear everything that you're saying about the background to it and your concerns around other incidents. In the end, though, if police investigate and an assault allegation, should he remain as a member of the government? Can he remain as a member?
I'm not going to get involved in answering double subjunctives.
Well, I mean, OK, so just a straightforward question. If police investigate, can he remain a member of the government?
The simple answer is I don't see what they have to investigate. And I'll tell you this, if a police officer...
if an allegation of assault is made against him...
Forgive me. Can I... And it's your right to ask the question, it's my right to try to answer. The common sense position, as most of our viewers will know, is that if it had been a police officer who had stopped her, and I don't accept that she was slammed against a pillar, I think most of us have seen that clip once or twice, and then taken her out, would that police officer have been committing an offence? No, he'd been doing his duty. If it had been a woman police officer, would she have been committing an offence? No, she would have been doing her duty. I think Mark did what anyone would have a duty to do, which is to prevent someone running towards the Chancellor of the Exchequer on a high-profile public occasion when we haven't a clue what they are. The fact they say, I'm peaceful, and a lot of people say they're peaceful, they aren't necessarily. And even if they were peaceful, do we want to have a habit of disrupting public events? We don't.
Mark Field's colleague, Sir Peter Bottomley, and also Hannah Martin of Greenpeace. Selwyn on Twitter says, don't be stupid. There's no need to apologise. Norman on Twitter, the more footage you watch of this, the more you see it wasn't just Mark Field removing women from the room. People should be wary of using the fact he's a Conservative MP as an excuse to have a go. Debbie on Twitter, what if she had a knife? In today's world, you can't take chances. Well done to him. And one anonymous texter, Mark Field did a great job. The woman was trespassing. Thanks for those comments. Do keep them coming in. There are claims this morning that tactical voting by Tory MPs helped.
So we get on to the if police investigate nonsense and should he remain in the government if they do, which was always going to happen. It is completely ridiculous, though. This shitweasel host knows for a fact that in the UK, a person is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, so being accused means nothing in relation to his job. If convicted, then maybe you can ask that question. But we all know he can't be convicted, as he broke no law. She broke the law being there. Why have the BBC failed to call this out? If it was a Brexiteer gate crashing the event, and being ejected by a Labour MP, then the BBC would be all over it like a fly around shit, praising them and demanding the protester be arrested. Hypocrites. Even the viewers call out their bullshit, including what I said earlier about others doing it. Now let's watch that clip.
Mark Field's colleague, Sir Peter Bottomley, and also Hannah Martin of Greenpeace. Selwyn on Twitter says, don't be stupid. There's no need to apologise. Norman on Twitter, the more footage you watch of this, the more you see it wasn't just Mark Field removing women from the room. People should be wary of using the fact he's a Conservative MP as an excuse to have a go. Debbie on Twitter, what if she had a knife? In today's world, you can't take chances. Well done to him. And one anonymous texter, Mark Field did a great job. The woman was trespassing. Thanks for those comments. Do keep them coming in.
So there you see it. Plenty of people are removing them, and with force. The outrage is political because he is a Tory cabinet minister. So I'm going to end the video there, guys. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Don't forget to like and share as it helps the channel a lot. And I will see you all in the next video.